So this presentation covers the why, what, and how of manufacturing funding, delivered by a recognized expert and author in the manufacturing grant space. So it is my pleasure to introduce Micki today. Micki is the president of Lakeview Consulting, Inc., a team of 5 experienced grant professionals who have collectively obtained over $240 million in grant funding for nonprofit and for-profit clients. The Lakeview team provides research, writing, and consulting services to help those in the manufacturing and technology communities grow and succeed. Micki has over 15 years experience performing grant incentive consulting services for clients in the manufacturing and technology communities, including trade associations, college and university technical vocational programs, manufacturing extension partnership centers, and for manufacturing and technology companies. Her engineering and business degrees, as well as over 25 years experience in manufacturing, provide a sound technical foundation for her grant writing services. She has personally obtained over $60 million in grant funding for her clients. Micki published the book, The For-Profit Grant Writing Guide, in 2014, and is one of less than 350 grant professional certified writers in the United States. She has been a mentor and a coach and volunteers at local nonprofits. So please welcome Micki. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you, and I really appreciate the opportunity. This is my opportunity to talk about one of my favorite topics, which is money. And I'm pretty sure all of you like to talk about money, but this is money that specifically impacts the manufacturing community. So I hope everybody enjoys the presentation and we will get started. So as Elisa said, my name is Micki Vandeloo. I'm the president of Lakeview Consulting. And what is Lakeview Consulting? So Lakeview Consulting's purpose is to ensure economic prosperity for current and future workers. And the way we do that is we help connect manufacturers and companies in the manufacturing and technology communities with funding to support their growth initiatives. We also provide other services such as custom apprenticeship development and market expansion services. So our mission and vision is to accelerate growth and innovation by providing resources to the U.S. manufacturing and technology communities. So who are the people that we help in those communities? We help manufacturers and technology communities, obviously, but we also help the organizations that serve manufacturing and technology companies. So educators, trade associations, trade association foundations, workforce development nonprofits. So our goal is to work with companies that can not only participate in the manufacturing community by being manufacturers and technology companies, but also help companies that support manufacturers and technology companies, because by helping lift up those companies, we also help lift up the manufacturing community. So as Lisa said, I have over 25 years in manufacturing. So how did I get from a manufacturing career to where I am now? Well, basically throughout my manufacturing career and in different jobs, I worked for manufacturers, and I also worked for a manufacturing extension partnership, the Illinois Manufacturing Center. And through my jobs in manufacturing and around manufacturers, I got acquainted with grant funding. But what I found to be a common thread is anytime I worked with a manufacturer on grant funding, they really didn't know where that funding came from or how to access it. And I typically played that role when I was in manufacturing. I was the resident grant expert. So I was the person that found grants when I knew that our companies were going through different growth projects, and then I helped connect those companies to grants. And in the process, I found that I enjoyed the writing, I enjoyed the work, and I enjoyed helping connect manufacturers with funding. So I started Lakeview Consulting back in 2017, full-time. I did it as a side hustle before that, working in the manufacturing industry. And since 2017, I've brought a total of 6 subcontractors, so there's 7 of us total, onto my staff, and collectively we've helped our clients obtain over $260 million. And I myself, as Elisa said, have gotten over $60 million in manufacturing for things like capital investments, training, and then continuation of services and expansion of services for maybe manufacturing extension partnership centers, or even for manufacturers themselves. Like I said, I have 6 research and writing grant professionals, and we are the only grant writing firm focused on manufacturing. So our agenda for today, we're going to talk about, as Elisa said, the why, what, and how of manufacturing funding. So first, we're going to talk about why do manufacturers need grants or incentives, and then what funding is available. We're going to talk a little bit about the grant landscape for manufacturers, and it is very interesting right now. It's a very interesting time. How do manufacturers access funding, and then how can we help you? So talking about the why first, because you always start with the why, right? So why do manufacturers need grants or incentives? So one thing it does is it helps manufacturers improve their bottom line, which, it helps offset the cost of growth-related initiatives. So I can use as an example here, I worked for a steel service center, and this was in the 2008-2009 timeframe. There was American Recovery and Reinvestment Act era funding that was being allocated to different states. And I live in the state of Illinois, and the company that I worked for was also located in the state of Illinois. And when Illinois got their funding, they used it in part to help manufacturers support the wind energy industry. If any of you have ever traveled in Northern Illinois around Chicago and Rockford, there's just wind turbine upon wind turbine, and most of those were installed around 2008 and 2009, but they needed manufacturers to support the manufacture of those wind turbines. So working for a steel service center, I recognized that we could possibly support that industry. So I put together a grant application for some equipment and to purchase a battery operated tractor trailer, because we did a lot of transportation of steel coils between the local mill and our facility. So we needed something to help us reduce our greenhouse gases. So I put in the application, and it got approved for around $650,000. And, we were really happy about that. And so it was a 2-year program, and this obviously helped offset the cost of purchasing that equipment, which was going to help us grow our market, was going to help us grow our business. Over the course of 2 years, however, because so many companies in the manufacturing community honestly went under in the 2008-2009 timeframe and then couldn't use their grant funds, that grant funding grew from $600,000 to $2.3 million. And we ended up purchasing around $3 million worth of equipment for $700,000 after we got the offset from the grants. So, obviously this dramatically increases the return on investment for projects like this. Even if you can get a $250,000 grant for a $750,000 piece of equipment, that's going to dramatically increase your return on investment. And that's what a lot of companies use to decide if they're going to do a capital investment. So, if you can increase the return on investment, you're going to be more likely to invest, which is going to cause you to invest. It's also going to cause many times job growth, because you need people to run those new machines. And it's also going to cause, external economic benefits. So things like increased tax revenue in the community that you're in. So what these grants fund is in economic development outcomes. So job creation, job retention, facility investment, facility growth, facility expansion, because all those things will lead to greater benefits for the outside community. If you get a tax credit, not only can you get a grant to offset the expense, you can also get a reduced tax liability. So a research and development tax credit, for example, can mean hundreds of thousands of dollars in tax credits for some companies for things that aren't even really truly research and development. They are simply experimentation for new product development. So I always tell clients in the manufacturing community, make sure that you check with an expert in R&D tax credit. I am not one, but I know of some and would be happy to share those if you want to inquire with me. I will share my email after this, at the end of this presentation, so you will be able to reach me to ask any questions if you have any lingering after the presentation. And also, because there are training grants and there are research and development grants and there are other types of grants that I'll talk about in a minute, those can also reduce those training expenses. So if you can get half of the cost of a training paid for, then you can effectively, if you have a training budget, do twice the training with that budget. So I tell people that, you know, you can really stretch your dollars using grant funding. The other thing that funding helps manufacturers do is it helps remove the roadblocks. So a lot of manufacturers right now are struggling with finding workers, and a lot of them to help attract workers are creating internships and apprenticeships. Well, there's funding out there to help support the cost of development of those apprenticeships, to help support the cost of hiring interns, to help support their salary while they're interns. And all that's meant to do is help incentivize manufacturers to remove that bottleneck, you know, to manufacturing, to encourage apprenticeships, to encourage, you know, internships. We've seen with COVID, a lot of manufacturers were having to pivot and produce PPE and do things that they wouldn't have done in normal, quote unquote, normal times, although I don't know if we'll ever truly see normal times again. But you know, in that time where everything was just pivoting and changing in the manufacturing community, there were a lot of roadblocks to do that for manufacturers. One was the cost of equipment. So I actually helped a manufacturer in Kansas. Kansas had a wonderful program to help people that were pivoting to PPE manufacturing or were having to deal with supply chain disruptions and had to bring manufacturing internal to their facility so that they didn't have to depend on those overseas supply chains. And I worked with one such company in Kansas, and that company, you know, they saw that as a real roadblock. They couldn't possibly produce that. They couldn't produce that PPE, which was actually soaps and sanitation type devices. And they couldn't produce bottles, which were being produced overseas, and they were having to wait months to get bottles. Well, they were having to turn away contracts and all that, but that purchase of that equipment and the expense associated with that was a roadblock for them. So what the grant funding program in Kansas City did was it provided over $2 million to help them purchase those two lines so that they can then, you know, produce that equipment, not have to rely on those foreign supply chains, not have to struggle with canceling orders because they don't have vital components. So recently, what a lot of us have seen just recently in the state of Ohio, there's been a significant grant offered to, I believe it was Intel, to produce semiconductor chips for automobiles and that type of thing. Again, bringing that manufacturing here to our country so that we don't have to depend on foreign companies to supply that vital component. So, you know, again, not only can manufacturers improve their bottom line, but they can also get those roadblocks to growth removed by using grant funding. So if this is the case, and you know, I'd be the first one to say this is a great benefit for manufacturers, and I would hope you would agree, why don't they pursue this funding? Well, I find that manufacturers fall into four camps. The first one is by far the most prevalent. I would say 95% of manufacturers that I've talked to simply don't know where the grants are that they can access or how to access them. And that lack of awareness causes manufacturers not to pursue the funding because they obviously have other things on their to-do list and they don't have the time to go out and look for grants. Just a little teaser, I will have a big announcement at the end of this presentation that will help fix that. But also once they know where the grants are, they don't know how to apply for them. I spoke to one this morning, for example, that said, well, it's great that these are out here, but can you help us actually fill out the applications? Because we don't have the time to do that. I understand that. So that's the biggest by far lack of awareness is the biggest reason by far that manufacturers don't pursue funding. But on the second point, which is again about 5% of the manufacturers, that application is pretty intimidating. In some cases, it's 5 to 10 pages long, maybe even more. They ask for a lot of information, and it just seems with the fires that everybody fights on a daily basis, that application just seems really intimidating. The third camp is people that have heard things about funding programs that either weren't true or were very specific to a situation, and they've got strong misconceptions about funding programs. So an example of this is a manufacturer that would look at me and say, well, I heard about somebody that got a grant and it got taken away from them. Well, a grant in essence is an agreement with the funder to perform certain activities. And if you do so, you're going to get the funding. Well, if you don't perform those activities or you don't meet the outcomes that you specify in that activity. So for example, if you were going to hire 15 people, but you only ended up hiring 5, that funder, because you've signed an agreement when you receive the grant to do those things, the funder can come back and say, well, because you only hired 1/3 of the people, we only give you 1/3 of the funding. I've not seen that happen. A lot of times those types of issues can be solved through communication with the funder. But a lot of people will hear about things like that or see things on TV about, incentives, huge incentives that are paid to bring manufacturers to the United States and to do manufacturing facilities. And the fact of it is, if those manufacturers build a facility and hire 100 people, but originally they were going to hire 500 people, they aren't going to get all the funding that they applied for because they weren't able to. Now, again, on a case-by-case basis, when I've seen this happen, communication with the funder can help with the outcome of not getting the funding, but there's this strong misconception. So that's the third camp. The fourth camp is really the people that know about funding, know about grants that are available, but just don't have an interest in applying. And that can be for any reason. It could be just a philosophical reason. They don't like to take money from the government. They don't feel that it's serving their community well by taking that money. I try to educate them on facts associated with grant funding, such as the money that's pooled into state grant coffers is not money that's taken away from other organizations. It is, and there are things about grant funding that people just don't know. So I try to educate, and to all these points, I try to educate manufacturers, but some of them just say, it's just not something we're interested in. And I do believe that knowledge is power. And if that is the case and they know about it, but they're still not interested, at least it's an informed decision. So what funding is available for manufacturers? Well, this is not an exhaustive list because every state is different, and most grants for manufacturers come from the state that they're in. Now, if you are a manufacturer with facilities in more than one state, the activities that happen in each of those states can typically pay for funding from that state. So for example, if you've got facilities in New York and Ohio, Ohio funding would apply to any activities that happen at the Ohio plant, and New York funding would apply to any activities that happen at the New York plant. There are also some training grant funding that if you were to bring people from Ohio to New York to do training, for example, at a headquarters or at a training center that you have, New York funding might be able to apply to those out-of-state people. So I work with a very large industrial distributor who has offices all over the United States, literally in every state of the United States and in Canada. And they wanted to do a training at their headquarters in Alabama. And so I applied through the Alabama training grant, and they covered people that came from all over the country to attend that training in Alabama. They don't typically pay for the travel, but they will pay for the training that is conducted. So, States have things such as training grants. That's almost every state has training grants. And then some of them have equipment grants. Some of them have innovation grants. There's recycling grants. There's infrastructure grants. A couple of examples, the state of Indiana has an equipment grant where if customers are putting in new technologies such as additive manufacturing or technologies to help, that are advanced technologies, that Indiana program can help pay for a significant amount of that equipment purchase. Similarly, in states like Connecticut, they've got innovation grants. So if a company, North Dakota has this or South Dakota has this as well, they have proof of concept grants. So if you are a company that does research and development, maybe in conjunction with a university or with a local community college, and you come up with a concept that you want to prove out more for a new product, this will allow you to get that activity offset. The recycling grants typically are for landfill avoidance. So Missouri has a program called the Missouri Market Development Program, and that provides up to $250,000 for equipment to produce products using recycled materials. So diverting material from landfills and using them actually in the manufacture of the product. And finally, infrastructure grants are typically offered by the state to help with things like road improvements and sometimes broadband. If you're in an industrial park, for example, that doesn't have high-speed internet access, there are grants through USDA and through other sources that can help with infrastructure. So that's again, a big picture of the state grant, definitely not an exhaustive list. On the federal level, there are grants for manufacturers that are pass-through grants. So that basically means that the federal government provides funding to each state for these programs or for regions of states for these programs, and then they are administered at the state or regional level. So the first one is the Trade Adjustment and Assistance Center funding. This is one that very few manufacturers know about. To qualify for it, you have to have had a 2 or 3 month drop in both employment and revenues over the past 2 or 3 years. They help you determine if you're qualified for this funding. But if you do qualify, you can get up to $75,000 for up to $150,000. So it provides a 50% match on any outsourced services. So the goal of this funding is to mitigate the effects of foreign trade. And the way they measure that is through drops in revenue and employment. So again, they walk you through the process. It's a there's regional offices throughout the United States. They walk you through the process. They help you determine if you're eligible, and then they help you fill out the application if you are. And it's a great program. You can take up to 5 years, I believe, to use the funding. And it's just a great source of funding for companies that do qualify. USDA has a couple of programs. The Rural Energy for America program provides funding for solar, wind, geothermal, any kind of renewable energy installations, also grants for energy efficiency upgrades. So if you purchase a piece of new equipment that is more energy efficient and you can prove that through an energy audit, you might be able to get a REAP grant, is what they call it, Rural Energy for America program grant. And they also have low interest loans, and they have grant and loan combinations. USDA has the Value Added Producer Program, and that's for agricultural product market expansion. So I know a company up in, I believe it was South Dakota, that produces like dairy products. So cottage cheese and sour cream and ice cream. And they were going to expand their products. So they received a Value Added Producer Program grant from USDA. Those grants are more complex than most state grants. We have helped companies with these types of grant applications. They are competitive, but they can provide a good amount of money, usually up to a couple $100,000 for these types of activities. The last one on the federal pass-through is the STEP program, State Trade Export Program, or State Trade Expansion Program. So this is for exporting activities. So going to trade shows, trade show booth construction, shipping samples over to trade shows that are overseas. So this is if you're wanting to expand your market to overseas markets. It can also help, a lot of them also help with the cost of interpreters for translating your website into a different language so that you can sell to another market. So these are really great programs. They can provide usually about $15,000 of funding for eligible activities. So that's the federal pass-through. At the federal level for small businesses, the biggest one is the SBIR and STTR programs, Small Business Innovation Research and Small Business Technology Transfer Research funding. Those are usually for very high-tech companies, startups mostly, and mostly those that work with universities or some kind of academic or research institution. So what is the grant landscape for manufacturers? So you know now that all these grants are currently available, and they do change a lot. So I can just briefly, I want to explain that most state grants, not the federal grants, well, the federal grants at the federal level, but the state grants are dependent on state budgets. So while a training program might be offered 1 year or for part of a year, it might change. They might go to a different focus. So for example, they might initially be providing training program for any kind of trading, and then they decide they only want to provide training for, technical skills training, or only for certain demographics. So underserved people, they might switch it to that. So the state has the ability to change grant programs and cancel grant programs. And then as new administrations come in, both on the federal and the state level, you'll see new grants appear. You'll see grants that maybe address an immediate problem or a current problem. So that's what's happening right now at the federal level, which again, that funding can go back through to the states. So we've seen that with internet broadband access funding. A lot of broadband money was brought from the federal level to the state level, and states are now doing their own broadband programs, as well as there being federal programs to expand broadband. So I believe truly with the combination of all these factors, the Presidential Buy America executive order, he also issued an executive order supporting manufacturing and supporting a manufacturing department within the federal government. Reshoring is a big issue right now with the continued supply chain issues that a lot of people are having. There's a really strong push to reshore and get more local supply chains. Infrastructure bill, that infrastructure bill that was just passed, there very well could be some money allocated at some level, again, maybe sent to the states to support manufacturers to build up the manufacturing infrastructure. And then workforce shortages. There's a lot of federal grants that are coming out for universities, for community colleges, for industry, community college or industry university collaborations to support career pathways, to help mitigate these workforce shortages, to try to help encourage underserved populations to join the workforce. So I believe that there will be additional funding. Now, what that funding will look like, I really don't know. The one thing that happens a lot of times is people will see that President Biden will announce a new program for meat processors, or they'll announce a new program for rural businesses. Well, that announcement does not equate to immediate grant funding. What the president is saying when he says there's going to be this new program is that there's going to be money allocated. All those, the devil's in the details with that. All that has to be figured out. So a lot of times there's months between when an announcement is made and when new funding programs actually come out. So I would be it's going to be interesting to see how quickly funding comes out, but I would say it'll be at least the second to third quarter of this year before you see some of this funding. So how do manufacturers access funding? How in the world do you bring this benefit to your facility? So I've developed this process, and it's a very time tested, true process. It's been proven effective. So the first step for a manufacturer is to define your projects. And this is where manufacturers get a little bit tripped up. So When you are working on a project or when you're planning a project, you want to determine a few things. You want to determine what you're going to do in this project, how you're going to do it, detailed, who's going to do it, what's it going to cost, and then what are the outcomes. So 5 things. What are you going to do? How are you going to do it? Who's going to do it? The budget and the outcome. So what's going to change after you get done with this project? So let's use, for example, a training project. So what you're going to do is you're going to provide training maybe to your maintenance staff. How are you going to do it? You're going to bring in an outside expert to train. He's going to train 15 people from your maintenance staff. He's going to do 3 2-day trainings. That's going to cost, again, to your budget, $30,000. And the outcome is going to be that your maintenance staff is going to be able to more efficiently work on the equipment that they work on. So once you define that project, then you can go out and research funding opportunities. And the better a project is defined, the more exact the research can be. The research takes a little bit of time because there's a lot of different places to look. So the research is the second step. The third step is to create a funding plan, because what we typically find is 3 to 10 different sources of funding for all the projects that a manufacturer might be doing. So the manufacturer defines all the projects they're going to be doing. That's typically done in an initial call. We go out and research the funding opportunities, and then we create a funding plan for them. So we prioritize. So if a company says, well, we know we're going to do this training, so we want to apply for training funding first. That's the priority. So then we apply for that funding. So that's the 4th step. And then, and this is the most important, we update the research for new opportunities, because that can, between the research and the application, that can take 1 to 2 months. And very likely something else will have come out by then. So then we just circle back around to the prioritize and create funding plan. We update the funding plan and we go through the process again. So as you can see, this is not an event, it's more of a process. And so we typically do engage for 6 to 12 months with a company, sometimes on an ongoing basis until they decide that they don't need us anymore. But with all the new opportunities that are coming out, we've really found that this is the most sound way to be able to do this work. Now, as a teaser, I will be talking about something that will help with this second step, the research funding opportunities step, which I think is going to be really beneficial to a lot of manufacturers. So again, our goal is to guide you through the funding process, and it is a process. We start with that free discovery call. So we talk about your projects. We talk about what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, who you're going to use, what you plan to spend, and then what the outcomes are going to be. So we kind of talk through that process with you, project design, and then we engage with clients for, again, 6 or 12 months or on an ongoing basis. We do monthly update calls during that engagement. So every month for about a half an hour or 45 minutes, we will go through any activity that we're doing on applications or research. We'll talk about any new opportunities that have been identified, and we'll reprioritize that funding plan to keep all that going. So our goal is to keep the funding effort going long-term. In addition, during that engagement, we can also do things like help find partners. So if you need to partner with a municipality or with a community college and you don't know who to partner with, we can do that research into who to partner with. And again, we do the ongoing research and writing, and that is all included in that engagement. So here's my big announcement. Up till now, there has not been one place that a manufacturer can go to find the grants that are available to them that is updated on a regular basis. But next week, we are going to be releasing the first manufacturing grant database. So this is an exclusive resource for the manufacturing community. It will connect any manufacturer to federal and state opportunities nationwide. It's going to be a subscription-based product that's going to be very affordable, can be canceled at any time. It's got a very user-friendly interface. I'm really excited about the simplicity of this database, but also the information that's contained in it. And most importantly, this is going to be updated on a monthly basis. So every month you're going to receive an updated, a note that the database has been updated. You can go in and check to see what's new. the best way right now to find out when we release this and to get the discounts that we're going to be offering to attendees for this webinar is to sign up for my newsletter, which you can see the website right there. And I know that this is being recorded, so hopefully anybody that receives this will be able to go right to this slide and sign up for the newsletter, because I will be announcing it through the newsletter. And again, there will be discounts to anybody that subscribes to the newsletter and attends this, and you'll be the first to know. So I'm really excited about this opportunity to inform the manufacturing community. So here is my contact information. I do prefer email for the most part, and my website is lakeviewconsulting.net. So I will turn it over for questions.
Great. It looks like we have one question that came through. And it says, Micki, I'm curious what you could do for a company like mine that does assemblies and sub-assemblies for other companies.
Yeah, so yeah, that would be manufacturing. So basically, again, sign up for the newsletter, Rick, and you'll be able to see exactly what grants are available to you. If you work with other companies, there are what's called collaborative grants. So you might be able to collaborate on a bigger initiative, maybe to train both of your companies in a certain area to support the manufacturing of those assemblies. A lot of times lean events are done between companies. So you can, as you're collaborating with other companies, then there might be grants that can help also encourage that again, I didn't talk about all the grants that were available, but basically there are some that help with collaboration. So, you know, and I also can provide partners, potential other partners. We do what's called market expansion services. So if you're looking to grow your business, we can provide lead generation and appointment setting services. So we can introduce you, find new companies that can use your services, and also introduce you to those companies. So in addition to the grant consulting, we also do that as well. But I'd love to talk to anyone specifically about their situation. So.
Wonderful. Do we have any other questions for Micki? I know you provided your contact information right there. Yep. So if we don't have any other questions, I will, anybody can reach out. Oh, wait, we might have one more that came through here. We have a question. We're having lots
of supply chain issues. Yeah.
You can see that, Micki.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah. You know, I would say, Matto, I would say to stay tuned. Right now, there are, depending on where you're located, and again, this would be a conversation we could have one-on-one, but there aren't any grants. Oh, okay, you're rural, which is good. I would say wait as long as you can to purchase the equipment, because most grants, just as a point of information, most grants will not look back to previously purchased equipment, and they won't cover that. They will only purchase what gets purchased. They will only cover what is purchased after the grant is. Same thing with training. After the grant is approved. There aren't currently very many programs to mitigate supply chain issues. Now there are in some states. So we can talk about offline, we can talk about what's available with your state. I would say, you know, let's just have a conversation, because the supply chain thing, I've gotten this inquiry from a lot of manufacturers. A lot of manufacturers are putting money out there that they don't know that they're going to get back. They're spending more money to be able to bring a supply chain, you know, in-house. And you know, it's a big issue right now. So let's talk offline, and maybe there's some way we can help you connect with funding.
Wonderful. Anyone else? Any other questions?
And again, if you purchase a subscription to that grant database, again, it's going to be very reasonably priced. If you purchase a subscription, you will know when these new opportunities come out. So.
Wonderful. Well, all right. I will be, as I mentioned, sending out the recording, the link for everybody that attended today and all those that registered. And it'll also be available on our association websites. So I just want to thank everybody for attending today, and thank you to Micki for a wonderful presentation.
Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity. I really enjoyed talking to everybody, and I hope to talk to each one of you very soon.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.